Read the headlines and then watch the new film American Winter on HBO. It's just out by the brothers Joe and Harry Gantz. It tells the story of 8 families in Portland, not people with chronic poverty in their family, but people with education and with degrees and with expectations, in most cases jobs. What happens to them when they fall on hard times? How shocked are they by the way the society and the economy treats them in this America of ours? It's all there in American Winter, and the story couldn't be more different than what you're reading in the statistics. Joe and Harry are with me in the studio. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Good to be here.
And if I sound downcast, it's because your film is so sad. And that sense of shock that you capture in the faces of these people has stuck with me for the days since I've watched it. Check it out.
Thank you for calling 211. How can I help you?
I need help with our electric bill.
We just got an eviction notice.
Are you sleeping in your car?
Under a bridge, actually. Yeah, and it's cold.
I came home, no lights, no nothing.
It's been 3 days since the water got turned off.
I'm getting foreclosed on.
I'm not making the money to pay for our house. He's working his butt off to try to find a job.
I went through the whole phone book. Not one of them said they were hiring.
I hear them saying, we skipped dinner because we need to feed our kids.
Working for minimum wage, you'll never achieve the American dream.
Forget the dreams. How do we make it to tomorrow? Tomorrow's the dream.
Start with just a quick survey of who these 8 families are and how you found them, Joe.
This situation is happening all over the country. 46% of Americans are either in poverty or near poverty. And after the Great Recession, when more people were out of work than any time in the last 80 years, suddenly they started cutting budgets and services all across the country. And that seemed like such a backwards reaction to all this need that was going on. And we decided to show this, and we chose Portland. We partnered with 211. 211 is a social service organization that is an info line if you need your heat turned on, you're losing your water, you're being evicted, you need food on the table, whatever it is, you're in crisis, you call 211, and they can't help you, but they can tell you where you can go to seek help.
Well, give us an example of some of the characters in the film, Harry.
Well, there's John, who is in his mid-50s and was working for 15 years for Columbia Sportswear, got laid off. He's got a Down syndrome son. And, it's very difficult to get a job when you're after 50. His unemployment runs out. His house, the only house his son has ever known, is on the auction block. We have Deirdre, who is a single mother with 4 kids. She did everything she was supposed to do. She got her education. She had a good job as a phlebotomist, but got laid off and now is actually scrapping metal to make ends meet. Finally gets a minimum wage job. But as you know, minimum wage doesn't go very far, and her children are often going hungry. And the effect that it has on the children is so devastating because, a parent does their best to protect their children from the economic realities they're going through. But, when you come home and your lights are out or you don't have food on the table, you can't protect a child.
The thing is that all of the families were comfortable 3 or 4 years ago. Some of them were solidly middle class, some were working class. These people have been working since they were teenagers. They are hard workers. They want to, get back on their feet, but the jobs they have often have gone from being $20, $22 jobs to $10, $12 jobs. And so they need social services to survive. And they have a full-time job, which they often work overtime in, and then it's a full-time job seeking social services, making the phone calls, going around, getting what you need.
Now, a lot of people like me will probably be watching this film and saying to themselves, well, this was shot in 2010. Surely things are better. Surely things are better, are they?
Well, this was actually shot 1 year ago over the winter of 2011 and 2012. And you'd think as Wall Street starts to improve and the economic numbers start to improve, but this is endemic. This has been happening over 30 or 40 years where wages have stayed stagnant and prices have gone up, and jobs have been taken overseas. And so the Great Recession just made it that much worse. And this whole new group of formerly middle-class families have joined the chronically poor at the very time that cuts to social services have made it harder and harder for the social service agencies to serve the people they had, let alone this whole new population.
But the statistics today, I mean, you read the headlines that I was referring to, and they say unemployment at its lowest in 4 years, 7.7%. Isn't that good news?
Well, unemployment may be edging down, but as Harry was saying, there's this whole group of folks that are working. They are the working poor. They are in poverty and they are working overtime. You can't support a family on minimum wage or even something that's close to minimum wage. So I think that there's almost two Americas. There's an America that is struggling to pay their bills. Do I pay the rent check this month? Do I pay the heat? Do I pay the water bill? And they can never quite get on top of their bills. And that is a situation which is so full of stress. Living with these families as we did, as we filmed them, being in the background for months and months, you see the stress that these families live with. The parents, they can't sleep at night because how am I going to get through tomorrow? How am I going to put food on the table? How am I going to keep this roof over my family's head? And so half of the country is in this situation, far more than people think. But the other half, I think, is not aware of this situation. That it may be a willful ignorance in some ways, but we have these stereotypes, these myths that say the people who are in this situation are not trying hard enough, they made mistakes, they, in some sense they deserve it, and it is so far from the truth. And I hope that this film can kind of break through some of these myths.
Well, let's drill down into some of the numbers. We'll come back to the people in a second. But the numbers, there's a gentleman in your film that says 26% of the population of Oregon is living on poverty level wages, is living in poverty, not because they're not working, but because, as you said, they're working for wages that just don't pay the bills. That's the national number. I think it's 24% nationally. What sort of representation is your Oregon group of the national picture, do you think?
I think it's totally representative because, first of all, Oregon has decent social services. With government services, with secular nonprofit, with religious nonprofit, it's still not enough. And Oregon has all different types of people there. Many people have moved there from other states. So it doesn't matter whether you're in a red state or a blue state, in an urban area or a rural area, people are experiencing this. And it's a unique time that I think we can help change people's minds through appealing to their hearts. Because everybody now knows somebody who is unemployed, who's lost their home, who is in some kind of financial rut that they weren't there a few years ago.
But do they know somebody? I mean, you've talked about how you had challenges getting this film funded. Certainly there are people living in the metropolises of New York and LA, perhaps, who just don't feel this is a critical story.
Well, interestingly, we interviewed, we wanted to make a film that was non-polarizing because it's important that people see this situation and be aware of what families across the country are dealing with. We wanted to make a film that the right, the left, and center could watch. It's these human stories, puts a face on these issues. We did interview two very right-wing folks, and we didn't end up putting them in the film because they were saying things about these folks that was so not true, that was so built on these myths, that it would seem almost like we were setting them up to be unaware. So we ended up not using them, but both of them told us how they were supporting members of their family, that they were supporting so many members of their family and trying to help. So they were very well aware of the situation, and they were very supportive and wanting to help the people that were closest to them. But then when you get beyond that to people in the general population, those people were kind of on their own.
So we want to take this unique time in history where all of these middle-class families have fallen into poverty around the country, and hopefully people can help change their minds about the value of funding the social safety net and the government not being the enemy, but actually helping lift people from poverty, because the value is both humanitarian and economic.
But the federal government is about to lose $80 billion in federal funding for exactly these kinds of programs, courtesy of the sequester.
Another thing we have to change, though, is the shame that people feel for being in this position. all of our families, as the film was coming out, were like, I don't know what people are going to think of me. They're going to think badly of me. When we showed it at the premiere, which was at the Portland Film Festival, they got a standing ovation, and they were so thrilled because it kind of let that weight off their shoulder. But what happens is, because people are so ashamed, they don't tell anybody. And so you do have this silent majority. And as they start to feel like, wow, look around us, there's half this country in this position, then you realize that, you know, it's nothing to be ashamed of. You didn't put yourself in this position, but also there's a tremendous political power when half the country is in this situation of poverty or near poverty.
Were any of them reluctant to be in your film?
Well, I wouldn't say that everybody agreed to be in the film, but most people feel so isolated. They go after social services, that, you know, people look right through them. It is so much work, and people seem to care so little that when we come and we say, we'd really like to hear what you have to say, we'd like to follow your experience, suddenly someone really is interested in them, and the vast majority of people were very happy to be a part of it.
The trajectory of the families that you follow, at the end you follow up with some sort of follow-up information on screen that talks about people finding jobs but at half the wages they were receiving before, part-time wages when they were looking for full-time work. I think about that when I look at these statistics telling us that the unemployment rate is down. I don't know about you, but I would encourage people to watch this film and question the numbers very carefully. What do they really represent? Are we creating new full-time living wage paying jobs or something else?
No, the union movement has less participation than any time in history. People as Brandon in our film, who was working at a $21 an hour job, is unemployed for a very long time, went through the phone book and called every business in the phone book looking for work. Finally, months and months later, gets a job, but he's making almost half as much and trying to support his family with half as much. And that's endemic across the country.
And I had a question about those operators on that 211 emergency hotline. What's the effect on them of hearing these stories day in, day out?
The other heroes in the film, other than the families, are the social service agency workers, whether they're working for the government or whether they're working for nonprofits or religious. And the 211 workers are in a unique situation because people get into social services because they want to help people. And if they are able to help people, they have a certain satisfaction because they're not in it for the money. Many of them are 1 or 2 paychecks away from their client's situation. But 211 workers are constantly hearing story after story after story, and they're doing their best to send them out to the resources that are there, but the resources are dwindling. And they have no idea if these people get the help because they don't know after the call comes in. So that is a very stressful place for a social service agent.
Were you ever, as filmmakers, tempted to reach into your own pocket and just help some of these folks?
We were with people that were struggling to find enough to eat, going to food banks, becoming homeless, in extremely difficult situations that you don't picture in this country, but is happening all across the country. So we would be, you know, we would film back and forth through different families. We'd break to go from one family to another, and we'd go have lunch. And that is, you know, that really is a difficult situation to be in. We had told all the families that we were going to pay them for their time at the end of filming or in the middle of editing when we were sure we were done. And we kept with that pretty much as we got close to the end and the story was coming together. We certainly broke our rule several times. But we did a pilot a year earlier. And in the pilot, we were shooting for less time, so it was less critical. We paid people at the end of the day, and just it wasn't a lot of money, but they were so appreciative, and their complete mood changed so dramatically over this little bit of money because they're under such intense pressure to just get to the next day and get to the next bill. So we had to explain this to all of the families, and they did understand.
I do want to get back, as we close, to the question of love, because it pours off the screen. It's an extraordinary and unexpected aspect of your film, to my mind. And it's so extraordinary because it comes from people who are up against so much themselves, particularly those kids. Their instinct is not, where's mine, it's where's yours. What did you learn from these families as you spent this much time with them?
Oh, a lot of different things. These kids would talk about going to school and sometimes being teased about what they were wearing, that it was it looked shabby. They don't have the iPods, they don't have the iPads. They don't miss that. They know from their experience what's important. They know how hard it is for their parents and how hard their parents are working to try to keep their heads above water in this financial undertow that they're struggling mightily with. So your heart goes out to these families because it does draw them together, and they're all in this. They love each other. They want to make this work, and they're going to do everything they can.
The film is playing now on HBO. Congratulations. But I know that you don't want to stop your work there. How can people help you get the film out? And this is the kind of thing they could, once it's been playing on HBO, maybe play in their town hall or church?
Absolutely. Our intention is to take the notoriety that the HBO screenings give us and take it to screenings in theaters, in union halls, with different organizations throughout the country who feel it's important to work with several nonprofits. We've already gotten several advocacy groups, union groups who want to do screenings in their communities throughout the country because there's a lot of people who don't have HBO, especially the people who are most affected by this. And we think it's important that the film start a movement with other films and other organizations. Every congressman, every senator has lobbyists knocking at their door trying to get their special interest across in this budget. And these folks don't have a lobbyist. And that's what this film is doing, giving a voice to those people who are the most affected by this Great Recession and have the least voice.
We have a website, AmericanWinterFilm.com, and we're doing this outreach campaign for the next year, year and a half. We've gone to many states, and one at a time we're going to try to get the word out, not just to the people in the social service community and the people directly affected by this, but hopefully to the legislatures of that state and try to make some real positive change.
American Winter is playing on HBO. Check it out, and you can get more information at our website.